So this is my project, Better Late Than Never. I was required to attend a conference and do a project based on what I learned on that conference and then present it to peers. So this is my inquiry project, looking at ways that I can make the school experience more positive for neurodiverse students. So, first of all, I think it's important to start with a definition of neurodiversity, as it's a very new term to a lot of people. Basically, what neurodiversity is it's a paradigm shift looking at how neurological differences are a normal part of human brain variation. So, what that means is we look at conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, etc., and instead of considering them dysfunctions, disorders, deficits, we look at them as normal brain variations that have strengths and challenges just as a typical type of brain functioning would have. So this also really considers a social model over a medical model. If we look at the medical model, which is what we've really been running with for the last 20 years or longer, it really looks at a deficit and challenge based example. Basically, it's saying that people with these types of conditions or brain variations are not normal and they are broken and that they need to be fixed or transformed or shaped into being a normal or typical type of person with normal, typical type of behaviors. A social model, on the other hand, looks more at acceptance of the normal brain variations, the challenges and strengths that go along with that, realizing that the world needs different kinds of brains and that our world is better when we have neurological diversity. And so that's the big difference there. It is also a really strengths based. We are looking at what strengths neurodiverse brain patterns have to offer the world instead of considering all of the deficits and challenges instead. All right, so the conference that I attended was called Autism Explained Online Summit. It was a week-long summit. There was 25 different presentations over about 5 days. Everything was done online, and which was amazing because I could watch and listen at my leisure, as well as the speakers of the conference could record their presentations at their leisure and their time convenience. And so it saved a whole lot of money and travel. It was great for the environment, great for everything. The really significant part of this summit is that 75% of the speakers were actually autistic. This goes along with the social model of looking at neurodiversity in that we assume that people who are autistic are the first person and the first resource that we should be speaking to if we want to learn about autism. Uh, Nothing about them without them. It tends to be a part of their thinking. If you want to learn about autism, ask an autistic. And so this is why that the organizers of the summit are autistic, and most of the speakers were autistic as well. So some of the key learnings were autism and gender diversity, realizing that autism and gender fluidity often go hand in hand. There is a strong correlation between being autistic and being gender diverse. Many of the speakers were also gender diverse or gender fluid. And so there was a lot of conversations and sessions about the challenges and the concerns around that, because you have two groups of people who are marginalized and bullied and struggle and are unaccepted. And so when you put those two things together, you get even more concerns in that, and things become really difficult. This is a really new thing that is just being understood and realized. And so it was really interesting to hear from different people about those different challenges of being both gender diverse and autistic at the same time. Another key learning was about autism and girls. Girls present very differently than boys with autism, and part of that is because of the gender bias that is in a lot of the assessments that are out there, and it's also because girls tend to be better at masking autistic characteristics. And so, and again, they present usually as things that can be misdiagnosed as autism, as anxiety, bipolar, anorexia, and those types of things. So it's not necessarily that there are more boys that are autistic than girls. It may have a lot to do with the fact that the diagnoses aren't necessarily being done correctly or without bias. And most girls and women that are on the spectrum that are diagnosed are usually right now in their 30s and 40s. And so there was a lot of talk about what to do to support girls that may be on the autism spectrum as well. Context blindness was another really big key learning that was especially helpful for me and understanding as a parent of an autistic as well as a teacher of neurodiverse people, understanding that autistic people have a lot of trouble connecting the dots um, with a lot of social in a lot of social situations that neurotypical people just do easily. And so a lot of things need to be explained in very detailed, very matter of fact um, ways. And a lot of that contact blindness is what causes a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety in autistic people, which ends up basically presenting as it ends up being meltdowns or shutdowns. So I don't understand what's happening. I can't figure out how to cope. And so I'm either going to melt down or I'm going to shut down because I don't know how to deal with this situation. And so things that when we see a student that is unmotivated or violent or another kinds of things, it's not necessarily because the behavior is usually caused by an uncertainty or an anxiety because they don't understand something that is really easy for the rest of us, typical people, to understand. Autism and mental health was talked about quite a bit. Again, a huge correlation between mental health concerns and autism. Again, because you have a lot of anxiety, because you don't know what's happening, and you don't understand the way the world works. And the world is set up for neurotypical people. And when you're neurodiverse and you're constantly spending all kinds of time and energy trying to figure out what is going on in your world, it can become it can be very isolating. It can cause anxiety and depression and lots of kinds of things like that. So those are some concerns in that area. And of course, there was lots of sessions on autism in the school experience. Many autistic presenters talked about how difficult school was for them because they didn't understand what was going on a lot of the times, because they were marginalized and bullied, because they weren't allowed to do things in their way, and there was a constant force to try to be and act in the way that a neurotypical person does. And so school was quite miserable across the board for a lot of the speakers because of those differences. And so that was a big part of the learning for me, was understanding those things. All right, so the inquiry project that I came up with based on this summit was looking at what ways I can make the school experience more positive for neurodiverse students. I was really inspired by a TED Talk by Dr. Jack Van Houding, who is an autistic self-advocate. They have done a TED Talk about being autistic and how different it is than what neurotypical people can understand. And the thing that really struck me about this talk, and I'm going to continue this because my time limit is out for this particular recording. So I'm going to stop this recording and do part 2 coming up.